For 11 years, they were the quintessential dysfunctional family, defined by sharp barbs and a cramped couch in a drafty television studio. But when the cameras finally stopped rolling on Married with Children, a different kind of silence settled between the actors who played father and daughter. While the world saw Al Bundy's grumpy exterior and Kelly's rebellious spirit, the real-life bond between Ed O'Neill and Christina Applegate was far more complex than a sitcom script could ever capture. Years later, after a highly anticipated reunion brought them back into the same room, Christina decided it was time to speak out. She didn't come with gossip or scandals, but with a revelation about the man behind the persona that would change how fans viewed their relationship forever. What did she see in Ed that the rest of the world missed? In 1987, the landscape of American television was about to change forever, and at the center of that seismic shift was a 15-year-old girl named Christina Applegate. When she first walked onto the set of Married with Children, she wasn't just entering a workplace. She was entering a cultural phenomenon that would redefine what a family looked like to millions of viewers. Christina was cast as Kelly Bundy, the rebellious, often misunderstood daughter of the ultimate anti-hero, Al Bundy. While the role required a sharp sense of comedic timing and a certain level of fearlessness, the reality of being a teenager in such a high-profile environment was daunting. Christina was navigating the typical growing pains of adolescence, but she was doing so under the bright, hot lights of a Hollywood studio, with the eyes of the nation beginning to fixate on her every move. Directly across from her stood Ed O'Neill. At the time, Ed was an actor whose presence was as commanding as it was intimidating. He possessed a gravity that anchored the show, a seasoned pro energy that commanded respect the moment he stepped onto the soundstage. To the public, Al and Kelly Bundy were the heart of a show that pushed every boundary of polite society, trading insults that made audiences gasp and laugh in equal measure. But behind the scenes, the dynamic was much quieter and far more observant. Christina found herself looking to the adults around her, especially Ed, for silent cues on how to survive the sudden, overwhelming pressure of fame. She wasn't just learning her lines. She was learning how to exist in a world that often treats young actors like disposable products. Ed became a pillar of the production, a steady hand in a whirlwind of scripts, rehearsals, and the chaotic energy of a burgeoning hit. While their characters were famous for their constant bickering, the atmosphere off-camera was thick with a very different kind of energy. Christina recalls those early days as a period of intense observation. She watched Ed closely, trying to decipher the man behind the grumbles. She found herself constantly wondering where the character of Al Bundy ended and where the real Ed O'Neill began. Was he truly as cynical as the man on the screen, or was there something more profound hidden beneath the surface? The sitcom quickly became a massive hit, turning the cast into global superstars almost overnight. Yet, despite the shared success and the long hours spent in the cramped Bundy living room, Ed maintained a certain professional distance. He was kind, he was focused, and he was undeniably the leader of the group, but he didn't easily let people into his inner world. This left a young Christina feeling a strange sense of isolation. She wondered if the family bond they portrayed for the cameras was strictly a professional arrangement, or if there was a deeper connection waiting to be discovered. She craved a mentor, a father figure who could guide her through the pitfalls of Hollywood. But Ed remained an enigma, a silent giant who seemed to be watching everyone as closely as they were watching him. As the show reached its absolute peak of global success and the pressure on the cast intensified, Christina began to notice a subtle but undeniable shift in Ed's behavior. It was a look in his eyes or a heaviness in his posture that suggested he was carrying a secret burden, one he wasn't sharing with his castmates, and one that threatened to change the dynamic of their family forever. As the seasons of Married with Children rolled on, the atmosphere on the soundstage began to undergo a subtle but profound transformation. Christina Applegate was no longer the young teenager who had first stepped onto the set with wide-eyed wonder. She was maturing into a woman, and with that growth came a level of fame that few can truly prepare for. She had become a household name, a face recognized on magazine covers and billboards across the globe. But in Hollywood, fame is often a double-edged sword. With the adoration of millions came the intense scrutiny of the media and the many pitfalls that wait for young stars in an industry that rarely prioritizes their well-being. It was during this delicate transition from child star to adult actress that the dynamic between Christina and Ed O'Neill took an unexpected and deeply significant turn. Ed was never the kind of man to pull someone aside for a long heart-to-heart speech. He didn't offer grand emotional advice or play the part of a typical Hollywood mentor. Instead, he led through a quiet, unwavering example. Christina began to notice that while the world saw a grumpy, defeated shoe salesman on screen, the man behind the character was someone who had absolute mastery over his environment. He showed her, through his daily actions, how to maintain a sense of dignity and self-respect in an industry that often tries to strip those qualities away. She watched how he handled the pressure of being the lead of a controversial show, how he remained professional even when the scripts were challenging, and how he refused to let the chaos of fame change his core values. Slowly, the layers of Ed's gruff exterior began to peel away in Christina's eyes. She started to see that his perceived distance wasn't coldness. It was a protective shell. Ed was fiercely private and deeply protective of the work they were doing together. On more than one occasion, he acted as a silent shield for the younger cast members. When network executives pushed for changes that felt wrong or when the demands of the studio became too heavy, Ed was the one who stood his ground, ensuring that the set remained a safe space for his TV children to grow and learn. He was a man of immense strength, but that strength was often used to benefit others without them ever knowing the full extent of his intervention. However, this growing respect brought with it a bittersweet realization for Christina. She understood that while she was learning everything about the craft of acting from Ed, she still knew very little about the man himself. He was a mentor in every professional sense, but he remained a stranger in spirit. They shared a bond built on a rock-solid foundation of professional respect, yet there was a gap between them, a space where personal intimacy should have been. It was a relationship defined by what was left unsaid, a deep connection that lacked the words to bridge the distance. They were family on the call sheet, but in the quiet moments between scenes, the vastness of their separate lives remained largely unexplored. This professional wall was a comfort, but it was also a barrier that would remain unbridled for the next several decades of their lives. This delicate balance of professional closeness and personal distance was suddenly shattered when the show came to an abrupt, unceremonious end in 1997. The Bundy family was pushed apart by the realities of the business, leading to a long, echoing period of silence. As the years turned into decades, Christina was left to wonder. Was their connection strong enough to survive the real world, or were they destined to remain strangers who once played at being a family? When the final curtain fell on Married, with children in 1997, the separation was more than just a career transition. It felt like the end of an era. For 11 years, Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill had seen each other nearly every day, sharing a stage that became a second home. But as the show concluded, the gravity of the real world took over, and the two actors began to drift into vastly different orbits. Christina was eager to shed the Kelly Bundy persona, taking on daring, transformative roles on Broadway and in films that challenged the public's perception of her. Meanwhile, Ed eventually found a second wave of massive, history-making success on Modern Family, becoming the patriarch of a very different kind of television household. They were no longer the Bundys. They were two individual success stories navigating independent lives, separated by miles and the relentless pace of the entertainment industry. During this long hiatus, a strange phenomenon began to occur in Christina's life. Even though they rarely spoke, and their shared history seemed to be gathering dust in a Hollywood archive, she found herself constantly channeling the lessons she had learned from Ed. In moments of professional chaos, she would recall his stoic discipline. When the industry tried to push her past her comfort zone, she applied the firm boundaries she had seen him set years prior. It was as if his presence had become a permanent part of her psychological toolkit. The distance of the years allowed her to look back at their time together with fresh, adult eyes. She began to realize that the exposure she would eventually share with the world wasn't a story of hidden drama or secret feuds, but rather a profound exploration of the quiet, invisible impact one person can have on another without ever saying a word. The public, of course, loved to speculate. Tabloids often hinted at strained relationships or forgotten friendships, suggesting that the cast had turned their backs on one another once the paycheck stopped. But the truth was far quieter and more relatable. It was simply the story of two people who had shared a life-changing experience but had forgotten the mechanics of how to reach out across the growing silence. There was no animosity, only the natural drift of time and the awkwardness of reconnecting after so much has changed. Christina often wondered if Ed remembered those early days the same way she did, or if he viewed her as just another coworker from a job long finished. As she faced significant personal health battles and life-altering challenges in the 2000s and 2010s, those early lessons of resilience became more than just professional tips. They became lifelines. She had matured in the shadow of a man who valued substance over showmanship, and that realization was slowly building toward a breaking point. The silence between them wasn't a wall, but a bridge that had been neglected for too long. The question wasn't whether they cared for each other, but whether they would ever have the chance to say it. That opportunity arrived unexpectedly when an invitation for a formal reunion landed in their hands. It wasn't just a request for a photo op. It was a summons to confront decades of distance and finally address the unspoken words that had lingered between them since the 1990s. Would the reunion be a cold reminder of how much they had changed, or a doorway to something deeper? When the news broke that the cast of Married with Children would finally gather again, the world was electric with anticipation. For the fans, it was a chance to see Al, Peggy, Kelly, and Bud back together. A nostalgic trip to a simpler time of laugh tracks and over-the-top comedy. The public expected the usual reunion tropes. The rehashing of old jokes, the sharing of funny, behind-the-scenes bloopers, and perhaps a few classic catchphrases. But for Christina Applegate, the reunion wasn't about the show's legacy or the character of Kelly Bundy. It was a deeply personal moment of reckoning. Stepping back into Ed O'Neill's orbit after years of separate lives was like stepping back into a foundational part of her own identity. As she looked at Ed, she saw the gentle etchings of time on a man she had once viewed as an invincible, towering figure. In turn, Ed looked at Christina and saw a woman who had been through the fire. He saw a resilient survivor who had faced public health battles and personal hardships with a grace that far surpassed her years. It was in this space, away from the flashing lights of the red carpet and the prying eyes of the paparazzi, that Christina decided to expose the true reality of their relationship. This wasn't the kind of exposure the tabloids were looking for. There were no scandals or hidden grievances. Instead, she revealed a secret history of kindness that had taken place in the shadows of their public lives. Christina shared that during her darkest moments, particularly when she was navigating her well-documented health struggles, Ed had been a quiet, steady source of support. He hadn't sent press releases or made grand public gestures of thoughts and prayers for the sake of his image. Instead, he had simply been there. He was the one who consistently checked in on her, offering a supportive word or a steadying presence far from the media circus. She spoke of his profound humility, describing a man who valued genuine loyalty over 1,000 positive headlines. For Ed, being a friend wasn't a performance. It was a duty. In that moment of shared vulnerability, the mystery of Ed's reserved nature during their years on set was finally solved for Christina. She realized that he hadn't been distant because he didn't care or because he wanted to maintain a professional wall. He was distant because he cared too much to make his affection a spectacle. He was a man who believed that the most important connections are the ones that don't need an audience. The silent mentor she had watched from a distance as a teenager had, through years of quiet consistency, become a true friend in her adulthood. The professional respect that had formed their foundation had grown into something much rarer in Hollywood. A bond that didn't require a camera to exist. But as Christina shared these intimate details and the world began to see the true man behind Al Bundy, it raised a final, poignant question about the nature of their industry. In a world where everything is for sale, can a bond forged in the blinding spotlight of fame ever truly be normal? Or are they forever bound by the artifice that created them? As Christina continued to share her story, the narrative began to shift. It was no longer just about a famous TV show or a legendary character. It was becoming a deeply human story about the invisible threads that connect us. She began to speak openly about how Ed's influence had been the compass she used to navigate one of the most difficult journeys in show business. The transition from a teen idol to a respected, serious actress. In the late 80s and early 90s, it was easy for young stars to get lost in the mirrors of Hollywood vanity. The industry often demanded that you become a persona, a brand, or a caricature of yourself. But Ed O'Neill provided Christina with a different kind of blueprint, one based on survival through authenticity. She explained that Ed's steadfast refusal to play the game was his greatest lesson to her. He didn't chase every tabloid headline or engage in the superficial social climbing that defined much of the era. Instead, he maintained a clear, sharp line between his professional life and his personal identity. He taught her, through his very way of being, that your work is what you do, but it is not who you are. This revelation was genuinely shocking to many fans and critics who had tuned in expecting stories of backstage drama, ego clashes, or the typical diva behavior often associated with long-running hits. Instead of those tired tropes, Christina painted a portrait of a man who was the absolute antithesis of the lazy, cynical Al Bundy. The real Ed O'Neill was diligent, remarkably kind, and possessed a deep, quiet empathy. By exposing this side of him, Christina was also exposing the grand artifice of television itself. She showed the audience that while the world was watching the Bundy family fall apart for laughs, the most important parts of their real journey were happening in the quiet, unscripted minutes between the calls of action and cut. It was in those moments of shared silence, or a simple nod of encouragement before a difficult scene, that their true bond was forged. This new understanding of Ed's character allowed fans to see Married with Children through an entirely new lens. People began to realize that the incredible chemistry between Al and Kelly wasn't just the result of clever writing or good acting. It was a reflection of a genuine, protective brotherhood. Ed wasn't just playing a father. He was acting as a guardian for a young woman finding her way in a predatory industry. This layer of reality added a profound depth to the show's legacy, turning a cynical comedy into a tribute to a real-life partnership that had survived the test of time and fame. The reunion had brought them back together, and the air was filled with a sense of healing and closure. Yet, even as they reconnected and celebrated this newfound transparency, a new and formidable challenge was appearing on the horizon. It was a trial that would test their bond and their resilience in a way that a fictional sitcom script never could. A real-life struggle that would require every ounce of the strength they had built together. Dealing with a legacy as massive and culturally ingrained as Married with Children is a challenge that few actors ever truly master. For many, a breakout role on a long-running sitcom becomes a gilded cage, a permanent association that prevents the world from seeing them as anything else. Christina Applegate felt this weight acutely as she transitioned into adulthood. She was Kelly Bundy to millions, a label that felt increasingly heavy as she sought to prove her range in more serious, complex projects. It was during these moments of professional doubt that Ed O'Neill stepped in to help her carry the burden. He didn't offer a scripted pep talk. He offered the perspective of a man who had lived through the same typecasting and come out the other side with his integrity intact. Ed was the one who encouraged Christina to keep pushing past the boundaries the industry tried to set for her. He spoke to her with a quiet, firm authority, reminding her that the characters they created weren't a trap, but a gift. He explained that having the opportunity to connect with so many people was a rare privilege, and that the foundation they built on that cramped living room set was what gave them the freedom to explore new horizons later. This chapter of their lives was defined by a profound, mutual support system that existed entirely out of the public eye. As Ed began his second act with the massive success of Modern Family, Christina was in the front row of his life, cheering him on. And when Christina took on daring roles in shows like Dead to Me, Ed was there to remind her of the power she held as an artist. In her reflections, Christina exposed a side of Ed that few had ever seen: his deep, inherent selflessness. She shared how Ed would often intentionally downplay his own performance or skip a chance for a solo spotlight to make sure the actors around him had the space to shine. In an industry notoriously built on ego and star power, Ed O'Neill was a genuine anomaly. He didn't need to be the loudest person in the room to be the most respected. This was the secret Christina wanted the world to finally understand. He was a man who used his status to lift others up, rather than to pull them down. Their reunion, therefore, was far more than a simple celebration of a TV show's anniversary. It was a public commitment to a shared future. They recognized that they belonged to a very small, rare group of people who truly understood the unique, crushing pressure of being in the public eye for nearly 4 decades. The bond was no longer about a father and daughter on a television screen. It had evolved into a partnership of 2 survivors. They were veterans of the Hollywood machine who had found a rare kind of solace in each other's company, proving that even in a town known for temporary friendships, something permanent could endure. Now that the curtain had been pulled back and the truth of their relationship was finally out in the open, a new question began to circulate among fans and industry insiders alike. With this deep, real-life connection finally revealed, what did it mean for the future of the Bundy family legacy? Could there be a new chapter waiting for the characters? Or was the real-life friendship a signal that the story had finally reached its perfect conclusion? Today, the relationship between Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill has transcended the boundaries of a typical Hollywood professional association. It stands as a powerful, living testament to the enduring strength of a long-term connection. For years, they were bound by a contract and a shared television set, but now they are bound by something far more significant: a history of mutual respect that has finally matured into a deep, personal friendship. Christina's brave decision to speak openly about Ed's true character, the side the cameras never captured, hasn't just enlightened the public. It has brought the two of them closer than ever before. The barriers of star and co-star have completely dissolved, leaving behind a bond that is as real as any family tie. They no longer wait for formal reunions or industry events to cross paths. Instead, they have become a consistent, reliable part of each other's daily lives. Christina describes their current dynamic not as acting colleagues, but as a source of deep, unconditional family love. This is the kind of love that doesn't require a script to guide it or a laugh track to validate it. It is found in quiet phone calls, private visits, and the simple knowledge that the other person is only a phone call away. By exposing Ed's hidden kindness to the world, Christina did something even more profound for herself. She gave herself permission to be truly vulnerable. Sharing the story of how Ed supported her through her health struggles allowed her to stop hiding behind the Kelly Bundy mask and show the world the resilient woman she truly is. Because of this transparency, the story of the Bundys has been fundamentally rewritten in the minds of the public. It is no longer just a cynical tale about a miserable, bickering family in a Chicago suburb. Instead, it has become the backstory for a much more inspiring narrative. The story of 2 actors in Los Angeles who essentially grew up together in the public eye. They faced the crushing weight of fame together, navigated the changing tides of the industry together, and, most importantly, stayed true to one another when the world around them was constantly shifting. This exposure was never meant to be a betrayal of their privacy. It was an intentional act of love and gratitude. It serves as a poignant reminder to all of us that behind every famous face, behind every iconic character and red carpet smile, is a human being looking for a genuine connection. Sometimes the most beautiful and stable relationships aren't the ones that start with a spark, but the ones that take decades of quiet, consistent growth to fully bloom. Christina and Ed didn't just survive the spotlight. They used it to forge a friendship that is now brighter than any stage light. As we look back at the incredible 40-year journey of these 2 cultural icons, we are left to wonder about the hidden reality of our favorite shows. If the Bundys were actually a story of secret kindness and protective brotherhood, how many other TV families are out there holding similar secrets of love and support that we, the audience, will never truly know? The remarkable journey of Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill serves as a profound reminder that in the high-stakes world of Hollywood, fame is a fleeting guest, but true character is a permanent resident. For over 3 decades, we saw them through the distorted lens of a television screen, believing we knew their story because we knew their characters. However, Christina's heartfelt revelations have stripped away that artifice, urging us all to look past the iconic roles and appreciate the raw human struggles and quiet triumphs that exist underneath the surface. Their evolution from sitcom co-stars to genuine, lifelong friends offers a rare and beautiful glimpse into the true heart of an industry often criticized for being superficial. It proves that even in a world built on make-believe and carefully constructed personas, something deeply real and enduring can grow. Ed O'Neill may always be remembered by the world as Al Bundy, the grumpy, sarcastic face of a generation's frustration. But to Christina, he represents something far more significant. He is the man who stood beside her when the world was watching her every move, the mentor who provided a steady hand when the pressures of fame threatened to overwhelm her. He was her anchor in a sea of public scrutiny, showing her that integrity is not about what you say when the cameras are rolling, but what you do when they are turned off. By choosing to share this side of him, Christina has not only honored his legacy, but also highlighted the importance of silent strength. Their story is a celebration of the fact that our most defining moments aren't usually the ones that end up in a highlight reel, but the ones shared in confidence and kindness. Their journey invites each of us to pause and think about the people in our own lives who have supported us quietly, without asking for credit or applause. Is there someone in your life, a friend, a mentor, or a family member, whose true, selfless character deserves to be recognized? When we reflect on the unbreakable bond between these two stars, we can see that the most meaningful stories aren't the ones told for the cameras or written in scripts. Instead, they are the stories lived in the quiet moments, the ones that sustain us when the lights go out and the world goes quiet. Thank you for joining us as we explored the hidden heart of a television legend and the enduring power of a friendship that stood the test of time.